All right, welcome back to the program. Osato Guobadia is joining me right now. He's an energy expert with Stears Business. Hello, Osato, and good to speak with you again.
Hi, Nancy. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Again.
Yes. Okay, Osato.
I'm okay.
Yeah. I guess we are all trying to be okay too. Let's quickly move ahead and let's talk about, just briefly explain to our viewers what the TCN really is all about. Because when the power sector was unbundled, we had about 11 discos, 1 TCN, and 6 discos, I guess. So what is the TCN, Gencos, yes. What is the TCN responsible for? That's the transmission company of Nigeria.
Right. So essentially, the TCN is responsible for getting the electricity from the power generating plants to the discos, who then give it to us. That is the simple role of the TCN, right? So everything involved with that process, the transmission of electricity, the adjusting, the amount of power generated to match the amount of power demanded, all that is done by the TCN. So they are quite very important part of the whole puzzle.
So from what you're saying, okay, go ahead.
Context,
yeah.
We've had a number of national grid failures this year and over the years. And what that means that the entire grid, the entire nation is without power. And so that is directly TCN's responsibility. So that just shows you the gravity of the company.
Okay, Osato, I guess the network isn't too clear enough because I was finding it difficult to hear you very well. I don't know if our audio people should try to see to that, or I don't know if the network interruption is coming from your end, because I can hear another background, so I can't hear you very well. But I got the essence of what you're saying in terms of what the transmission company is about. It's like the wheel that, it manages the electricity transmission network of the country. Osato, are you still there?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's like the pipe whereby it evacuates power from the Gencos and will lead to the discos. So it's in the middle.
To the disco, ultimately give it to us.
Yeah, okay, so I hope our viewers got that. What's your view about this to and fro about privatizing or bundling TCN? Because at the time, I think sometime in March this year, the government, the BPA, did come out to say, okay, fine, that they're not going to sell it yet. They're still looking at the issues. Sometime earlier last month, they did say, okay, fine, we're going to be selling the TCN. What do you think about that? What's your overall view about what's been happening?
Well, so I'm not surprised at the proposal, right? We know that the government is on a significant revenue side. So they are going to consider, on all the sources of revenue they can get, right? They're going to weigh the pros and cons of different sources of funding. The sale of national assets is, of course, one of the avenues that they are considering, and the TCN falls under that. It's a very difficult one, just because there are issues, as we all know, in the power sector, right? Different stakeholders are not getting paid their full amount, and the sector is still being supported by largely by funding from the government. Like the CBN just gave us another loan the past few weeks. So, these conditions are not conducive for an investor to come in to buy TCN, right? In practice, it sounds good. In fact, this is what we want in practice, right? We want, the private sector controlling the TCN. We want the TCN responding to market incentives, and of course, we want investment in the TCN. But I worry that the type of institution that can afford to give TCN the funding it needs to avoid this recurrent national grid failures. Those type of institutions, I worry that they are not interested in investing in TCN in its current form, right? Given all the issues with the electricity sector. So it seems like a case where those issues will have to be solved for us to be hopeful about a sale being the success that will transform the industry.
Are you actually surprised that the issue around unbundling the TCN is coming at this time? Because if you recall some time ago, some years ago, according to the EPA, the Electric Power Act, if I'm not mistaken, the TCN was supposed to have been unbundled. But one way or the other, the government started managing that. Is this the right time?
Yeah.
Or
So after
is better late than never?
after the privatization happened, we know the government, they maintained their ownership of TCN, but they sold the Gencos, they sold the Discos to private investors, or market majority stake to private investors. With the TCN, they decided to own it, but it was being operated by the Canadian company, who was supposed to be experts in doing that. The issues are still there, right? Regardless of who is operating it, the sector split, the transmission, the funding, and we've been getting a lot of support from international donors, but it's clearly not enough. That's why the government is talking about the sale to maybe private investors who might be able to come in and actually invest properly in it. With regards to bonding of the TCN, I don't know that that is the solution, because if you look at other parts of the world, what they are talking about is spreading their transmission grid to cover wider areas. Right? They are talking of transmission grids coming together. Like in Europe, there's currently a conversation going on about how to have a transnational grid, a supranational grid, according to that covers the countries. The same thing is happening in America. They want more areas to be covered under the grid. So fundamentally, I think that is what there are benefits to having a grid that's wide and big and covers many areas each party operating in silos, right? Because what happens when let's say we have a grid, let's say we have just one grid in Lagos, for example, and the Lagos power plant is supplying the Lagos Discos. Well, what happens when the Lagos power plant goes down? There's no power plant to support the Discos, right? But if it's in a national grid, the Kainji Dam can take up that responsibility if the Lagos power plant goes down, or power plants in other parts of the country can take up that responsibility. So ultimately, we do want a national grid, and we do want to. We just need it to be properly funded and taken care of.
From what you've said, I'm going to raise two issues, and the first issue is the issue of the Canadian company, which we all know then. I think the name is Manitoba. There were issues around, around that concessioning, that Manitoba was not fit for us even at that time, and the government came again to start managing it. What lessons do you think that we should have learnt? I guess we would have learned some lessons, but what kind of lessons do you think we should have learned, especially with that issue or that concern or that mistake that we made at that time?
Well, right. You're right that there were concerns when Manitoba took over. They were concerned about the scale of the projects that they had executed in Canada. They were concerned that he wasn't impressive enough for what we are trying to do in the power sector here in Nigeria. But I don't want us to get away from this fact that ultimately, hopefully, is the solution, right? We get the best operators in the world, and we give them really decrepit equipment. They're still going to struggle. Not saying that the operators couldn't have done better, or there's no room for improvement. There definitely is. But the fundamental issues of the space are that while you are still using equipment that was built by NEPA, right? Equipment in the transmission sector has been obsolete for years, right? And that's what we're relying on. We talk about the SCADA system that's supposed to automate a lot of the PCA decisions. We have not been able to implement that. All the advanced countries in the world have that. Right? We are still struggling. When there's a fault on the transmission grid, we are still looking for where the fault is. When in other countries, there's a system that tells them immediately what the fault is. So obviously, we want to get to that point, but it's a issue. It's really about the money. And as you know, the electricity sector is not self-funded. Right? It relies heavily on investment from outside parties. So this funding challenge has been the recurrent issue. That is the problem that I think we need to solve.
Okay, the other issue I want us to take a look at, it's what will be the coloration of the sale, because earlier last month the BPE actually called for bids from private investors. If we take a look at how the TCN, I think, is structured, you have what they call the TSP, the transmission service providers, which is involved in power assets such as transformers and co. You have what you call the market operations, in charge of the funds, collecting of funds, even making payments and co for gas. Then I think the third one is the system operations, whereby they maintain, you know. So what kind of coloration are you expecting from the privatization? Perhaps should all these seemingly, would I call them departments or so, now be on their own? What should this privatization look like?
Right. That's a good question. The worry, the way things are, it's looking like, if this is still continues the way things are, it's looking like whoever buys the TCN, simply might end up with the same issues that the fiscals are suffering from right now, right? Which is that, the sector is not time for investment. And you want to get funding from the banks or from other institutions, the transmission company is not attractive because, it doesn't generate its own revenue. It's relying heavily on funding from the government. So that's the big concern, right? The big concern is that might be the same thing happening with treatment that happened with the fiscals, and even the GenCo to some extent. I think what might be for the government to float some portion of the TCN on the stock exchange. Right, that would give them the immediate liquidity they are looking for, and that would also be a sign to investors, that okay, the government is serious, that the TCN is serious. There's a minimum level of corporate governance and expecting the company, and so maybe if sale can become more practical and a decent valuation for the government in a few years down the road. But as of now, it's dicey about the success of the privatization effort is neither here nor there.
Osato, do you think that the nation is adequately prepared right now to go ahead with privatization of its power assets, bearing in mind what is happening macroeconomically and our seemingly reputation right now, talking about FDI, the social things happening, social happenings now in Nigeria? Do you think it would affect anything we would really want to privatize? I'm asking that, bearing in mind what's happening across the country. Would investors consider what is happening?
Right. Ultimately, yeah, you're right. That Nigeria is in a very tough position now, macroeconomically, and the government is responding. So the challenge with that is, ultimately it comes down to having accountability, more accountability in how the funds and how the projects are executed, right? Having accountability in the project to ensure that the small money that the government has goes to the right places. That is the bottleneck. Right? There's not so much that it's fine to have to sell assets and get more funding, but the question is how is the funding being used? Right? That is what we need to find. So that's what we need to focus on first, and before making decisions like selling the TCN and possibly get through the evaluation for it, and the country itself might not also get out. So privatization is good in practice, but the thing and it can be good for the common man on the street in practice, but there are these bottlenecks that the government should be solving. Ensure that don't just announce a program, right? Everyone knows that there are issues with execution of this government program in Nigeria, corruption, bureaucracy, lack of competence. Like, solve those problems. When you announce a project, also have plans in place to deal with those problems to ensure that the funding is going to where it's intended to go to. And again, talk about further privatization to help the country out.
Finally, Osato, how do you think that this privatization or this proposed privatization should go so that we don't mishandle it like what was done, I think, in 2013 when the power sector was
Mm-hmm.
overhauled, when discos and gencos came into being, when government partially sold? Because we can't say, is it totally privatized? Because government has about 40% or so
Yeah, it was partly
of it.
privatized.
Yeah, so how do you think that this should be handled? How do you think it should be handled?
Right. Well, so ultimately, it comes down to what we need is we need investors with deep pockets, right? That's what we need in the power sector. If we can get an investor with deep pockets and with patient capital that's willing to invest in the sector and see its returns, that see its returns coming over time, and that's ultimately what. But what we saw with the first privatization, or with the first part privatization, was that some investors didn't have deep pockets, and even more than that, they were surprised by the scale of the problem. They said it themselves. They were surprised by the scale of the problem that they actually uncovered. Right? So the due diligence that was done was not sufficient. So these are the things that we need to ensure we're getting out this time around. Whoever is coming in, let us get a clear idea of how much funding is needed to get the sector up to the stage that can be profitable for the investor. And let that be clear. Let that be timely, consistent due diligence and a transparent process for the sale of the asset. I think these are the things that we have to ensure that. And also, government has to be consistent, right? Government has to be consistent in the message it's given out to the private investors. Now, if government is saying that we must do this, right, you cannot change it down the road.
Okay.
Right? Because people's investments are on the line and it's going to changing policy here and there is going to discourage further investments. So government has to be consistent. This is the policy, you have to follow through with it. Right? We've seen lots of this in the past few months. Right? Nancy was on this show that we are here talking about petrol subsidies being over. Right? And we see what we've seen that petrol subsidies have come back and they've come back to go for. Right? So such this something doesn't really help investment coming in. There needs to be consistency. That, okay, the government has said that this is what they're going to do and it has to be what they actually do.
Okay. I think, Osato, we'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for joining us today. I know there's so much for us to talk about when it comes to TCN, but I'll take a look at this topic some other time. Let's also follow the developments as it unfolds. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right. Yeah, nice to have you too. All right, at this time, let's quickly take the interview that I had with Professor Ken Ife, who is a consultant with the ECOWAS Commission, as well as the development economist. We talked about 7 years of Godwin Emefiele as the CBN chief. We tried to chronicle the 7 years in office of Emefiele. Just take a look at the interview. I think at the end of the interview, you'll see me tomorrow, I guess. So have a pleasant day, everyone. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. In 7 years, what kind of central banking have we seen under Godwin Emefiele in 7 years?
Well, we have actually